So we'll have to give a little general introduction. The Kalachakra, I call it the Buddha time machine. I'm the only one who does that. But I like it myself. So. But it's a different kind of a time machine, and one of our goals tonight will be that at least you'll understand what I mean by the Buddha time machine. It's different from H.G. Wells' time machine, which is a contraption that you get in and you go around in time as if time was a medium like water or something, or air, in which you could travel, or space. But the Buddha time machine is quite different. The Buddha time machine is where time itself becomes a machine, and I'll try to explain that. How many people have heard of Shambhala? Same group. Shambhala is the original of what is known as Shangri-La, which everyone has heard of, right? I think there was a study done. There's 5,000 Shangri-La motels in the United States. Everyone goes there for eternal rejuvenation. And but the original was Shambhala, and Shambhala is a magic kingdom. It's the Kalachakra Tantra is the teaching of the Buddhas, Shakyamuni Buddha, and the legend is that it was taught. Actually, you have to understand that from the Tibetan belief, a Buddha is a being who is not a normal human being, or a normal divine being. A Buddha is a kind of teaching being who has achieved a oneness with infinity, and at the same time manifests in whatever form is necessary for whatever person or being, non-human being, who is in any kind of trouble or who is frustrated and not achieving the happiness that they wish to achieve. So it's an incredibly cosmic imagination of a sort of form of life a Buddha is. This is the summit of evolution. It's what a human being or a divine being can evolve into is a Buddha being. It's a being that is completely achieved the realization of selflessness, what they call, and meaning that sort of a being who perceives everything from everyone else's perspective simultaneously, right away. And you know what I mean? Like, for example, if you're a mother or a father or a lover or a brother or sister, you've had moments of empathy where you could experience or you could feel the feeling of that loved one, maybe when they got hurt or maybe when they were very happy, and you could actually feel that, almost practically feel that feeling. Everyone has had that experience. They're usually very brief, momentary, in between all the irritation. And Buddha is a being that always has that feeling, always about all beings. So it's a being who has evolved from our condition, from a condition like ours of being able to be empathetic with a few people who we identify with, or a few beings who we identify with, to be able to identify with all beings and feel all of their feelings infinitely, which of course is inconceivable to us. So that's what a Buddha is. So from their view, in other words, we have the hope and the purpose of our lives, from the Buddhist perspective, is to evolve infinitely towards such infinite happiness and infinite effectiveness, infinite capacity, where we can do all of these things for all the beings that we love. And we love more and more, and we love beings infinitely. When we achieve that state, we don't divide and say, well, I like this one, but I don't like that one. We love all of them equally. And because we remember when we become a Buddha that all of them in some life or another have been our mother and our lover and whatever it may be. So that's the first thing. So therefore, when we refer to the Buddha, when the Tibetans refer to the Buddha's biography, they're referring to the deeds of a being who has more than normal human capacity. And therefore, they have this, what modern people would call a legend, that when the Buddha was teaching the Four Noble Truths to the monastic community, at the same time he was teaching the Prajnaparamita, the Transcendent Wisdom Sutra, on Mount Gurdhakuta, on a certain mountain outside of town, the Vulture Heap Mountain. And at the same time, in a third embodiment, he was teaching the Kalachakra Tantra in South India, in a place called Amaravati, in what is nowadays Andhra Pradesh, on the Krishna River. And he taught, that third thing that he taught, he had a different body. He had a body that had 4 faces. Front one was black, or blue-black. Right one was red, left one was white, back one was yellow. And he had 24 arms and 2 legs. And he was united with a consort who was standing in union with him. She was golden color, but she also had 4 faces and 8 arms. And in that, somehow he could talk over her shoulder, I guess. And because they were standing in union, she was a little shorter, but she had also 4 heads. And so he taught that Tantra in that form, the Tibetans believe. It's just as he was teaching the perfect wisdom or transcendent wisdom teaching in North India. And the people for whom he taught it came from Shambhala, which is in some like Siberia or something, or the North Pole. It's somewhere, it's a magic country way in the north. And they came down there in airships. Really, this is in an Indian book from thousands of years ago, at least 1,000 years ago. And they flew down to this place in South India, and then they all went inside a stupa. There was a giant stupa at Amaravati, and actually inside the sort of big bell of the stupa, the big sort of dome of the stupa, although it looked like rock to us, but it's a huge space. And in that space, all of these people who flew in there, real UFOs, from Shambhala, came in there, and they parked in there. And then the Buddha taught them the Kalachakra Tantra. He initiated them. He created the mandala of the Kalachakra Tantra in this alternative space, in this other reality. And then he taught the Kalachakra Tantra in that form, in that multicolored form that he had of that body, which is kind of neat, actually. Of course, modern, historians, Western, they say that it was made up 1,500 years later in Kashmir and all this. They have all these theories because they don't believe that beings can evolve into having such ability, such capacities. The king of Shambhala at the time was a man named Suchandra, and the people of Shambhala spoke Sanskrit and speak Sanskrit, and they were Brahmin, well, not all Brahmins, but they're Hindus. At that time, they were Brahmins leading them and warriors and different people. And but they were so touched by this special teaching of the Kalachakra that they went back to Shambhala with that teaching, which was not known in India for about 1,000 years. It was hidden in India. And after 700 years of practicing that teaching, they abolished the caste system. They remained sort of Brahmin, Hindu, but they abolished the caste system, and the seventh king said that all beings should be henceforth of the diamond caste, what he said, and everyone was equal as a member of the diamond caste. So there was the one class, in that kingdom. And they built three-dimensional mandalas, huge palaces of the Kalachakra, in the garden of the king's palace, in the center of the capital, which name was Kalapa, the name of the capital of Shambhala. And Shambhala had 96 million inhabitants. It's not a small country, like a little hidden valley or something like the James Hilton Shangri-La. It's actually a huge country, surrounded by ice mountains and ice oceans and monsters and things. No one can get there. It has a force field over it, so no one can see it if they fly over it. And it has 96 provinces with these 90 million people in each province, Shambhala, and it's still there. It's waiting there, and it's under the reign of the 22nd king. Now, the 29th king. 7 of the pre-diamond caste kings, and then 22 of the democratic kings, what they call. And when the legend is that when there are 25 in the reign of the 25th democratic king, whose name is Rudra Kalkin, which happens to also correspond with the name of the 10th avatar of Vishnu, if those of you will notice. Kalki is. But anyway, his name is Rudra Kalkin, and Rudra Kalkin will, something will happen, and the country will be discovered by a world conqueror, is the prophecy. The world is at the time under the control of a single dictator who is a rather fierce character, and he's like Big Brother, 1984. And then he discovers Shambhala in the 23rd century or 24th century. And then as soon as he discovers it, that it's a huge country with many people that isn't under his control, he attacks it. And when he attacks it, they say, don't need to attack, you can come and live here, it's okay. And so he then pretends to just come in, like to immigrate. But as soon as he gets entrenched, he starts killing the Shambalonians, or whatever they're, Shambalans. And the minute he starts killing them, then they take out all these ray guns and high-tech weapons and the aircrafts and things. And they actually they have like kind of an Armageddon, But it's very quick. It's not a worldwide thing. They just do in his army, his elite troops. And then the world is liberated, and there's a golden age for 1,800 years, luckily. It's just a prophecy, I personally don't believe it could only be liberated for 1,800 years. I think once the world becomes liberated and everyone in the world gets interested in the Kalachakra Tantra, I think the whole planet becomes a little bit like the Starship Enterprise. And I don't think there's any going back. Why would there be any going back? But the Buddhists say that there will be. Just to make everyone remember impermanence, probably. So that's the legend of the Kalachakra Tantra, the Buddha time machine. And how it was taught. And why it was not available in India for over about 1,200 years from the time of the Shakyamuni Buddha. Because it was in Shambhala. Then around 800 or 900 of the Common Era, a great yogi, a siddha named Kalachakrapada, went to Shambhala. Very rarely people could go to Shambhala. It's incredibly hard to do so. A few Tibetan Lamas have done so, they say. And they went there, and they brought the Tantra back to India around that 8th, 9th, 10th century. And then from India it spread into Tibet in the 11th century. And then in Tibet, and it was, of course, widespread in India, though, before that, for a while. At the end of the time of the great, what I call the great siddhas, the great adepts in India, at the final sort of full flowering of Indian Buddhism in the 9th, 10th, and 11th century, the most elegant and beautiful time in India before India was overrun by barbarian conquerors, who have been basically ever since then. They have been overrun, because the problem with becoming a civilized country is that you let your defenses down. And so no one can be civilized and safe until the whole planet is civilized, which it isn't quite yet. Not till the 23rd century, apparently. So then it was destroyed in India again, along with Buddhism, around the 12th century, but by that time it was very firmly established in Tibet. And the Tibetans have kept it alive, the cult of the Kalachakra, the art of the Kalachakra, the sciences of the Kalachakra, and particularly the Dalai Lamas in the Potala, since the 5th Dalai Lama's time, during the construction of the Potala and the maintenance of the monastery in the Potala, the Kalachakra became kind of a very important sort of national cult. And the Dalai Lamas would occasionally do that initiation from the Potala, and the monks in the Potala trained in the Kalachakra arts, and they made a big thing out of it. Also in Mongolia, they had a big focus on the Kalachakra. The Kalachakra. Now there are 3 types of the teaching of the Kalachakra Tantra. Oh, now before I do that, let me explain now the title, the time machine. The Buddha, in the form of Kalachakra, has this form where he has 24 arms and 4 heads. And then every element of the body of the Buddha has some sort of a significance in relation to the flow of time. And also the mandala, in which mandala is like a palace and a community in which he manifests, he/she manifests, because he's a male-female. He's both male and female. He's several beings. The mandala palace in which the community manifests has 722 different divine beings in it. In each of whom have many, many minions and beings who so they work out of the Kalachakra, out of the mandala, out of this palace. And the palace is sort of like the World Trade Center. It's incredibly high. It's not like a small mansion like other mandalas. If you've ever seen a 3-dimensional mandala, it's huge. It has 3 buildings, one inside the other. The central building is actually unrealistically high. We always one Lama I know who we were studying the geometry of it, and we were looking for the elevator, because the central building is really tall, and very, very many stories high. And so, why does the Buddha do this? You see, because he connects it. It's connected to time. Chakra means wheel, and Kala means time. And time, in religion, I'm sure many of you know the Bhagavad Gita. In the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Vishnu or Krishna shows himself as Vishnu to Arjuna in the chariot as great time, Mahakala. And it's a very fierce, destructive form. And he shows himself as a body having many mouths and things, and he devours all the troops. Remember in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna's at the brink of war with his relatives, his nasty relatives. And then Vishnu shows sort of that he's the devourer of everything. He's great time, and time devours everything. And time is usually connoted in Buddhism as well with impermanence and death, and that things aren't going to last, and pleasures are fleeting, and our bodies decay, and our lives won't last long, and all this sort of thing. So time has a kind of negative thing about it, to worldly people. And as a religious symbol, it tends to be somewhat negative. So why the Buddha shows himself in this sort of supreme evolutionary form as the Kalachakra, the wheel of time? Well, remember, the Buddha has to be a Bodhisattva before he attains Buddhahood, right? And remember that a Bodhisattva is a being, could be an ordinary being like you or me, who, however, changes from being ordinary, not by any particular attainment, but by a particular dedication. Which is to say that being decides that life is too boring, just seeking their own self-interest all the time. And besides, they never satisfy their self-interest anyway. And so might be much more exciting to adopt the interest of other beings. And so the Bodhisattva decides that I'm going to do everything I can for all of my lives, for the infinity of my lives, to see to it that all other beings are free of suffering and all other beings achieve happiness, right? And that's the Bodhisattva vow, right? And the Bodhisattva even says, I personally will renounce the achievement of liberation or freedom from suffering myself, even if I have the ability to realize nirvana and have no more suffering personally. I will not seek that realization while a single being, other being, still suffers. So I will not accept nirvana until all beings have achieved nirvana. Right? That's the Bodhisattva vow. That's sort of the emotional element of it. And it isn't as loony as it sounds, believe me, for those of you who don't know Buddhism that well. It's not as nutty as it sounds, because for a Buddhist, in fact for a Buddhist it's very, very strictly logical to take such a vow, actually. Because such a person perceives themselves as having an eternal future anyway. And it perceives all other beings as having an eternal future anyway. Not eternal in the sense of sort of something static, but just constantly going on, you know. And so if you think that here you are with other beings, here we are, right? I mean, like in the West, how do we look at each other? Here we are. A couple of you have dropped by because this megaphone is disturbing the town from the Rebel Cafe. Some of you came on purpose. But anyway, you just met me. I just see you. We might never see each other. We don't much expect to see each other again. So it's kind of fun. We meet, hello, whatever, you know. But if we are Buddhists, if we really have that vision of karma, of the sea of evolution, of sort of evolutionary biology, let's say, according to the Buddhists, spiritual biology, then everyone we see, we have already seen infinite numbers of times. We have already encountered each other endlessly in many lives. We will encounter each other endlessly in many lives. Again. In fact, we're never going to be able to get rid of each other. That's the terrible thing or the wonderful thing, depending. Right? And so if we're stuck with each other in this way infinitely, and that means that, you know, now we don't know each other much, but next life we're going to be husband and wife, or brother and sister, or father and son, or whatever it may be, then it is strictly logical that we would dedicate ourselves, if we thought it was possible, we would dedicate ourselves to optimizing both of our situations, right? In other words, you're never going to get away from another person. You're going to be locked in a chamber with them permanently. Then there's no escape from them, nor they from you. Then it's logical that we should all optimize our situation, right? So therefore, for Buddhists, then they take a Bodhisattva vow. They say, let all beings be happy. Let me attain Buddhahood to be able to see to it that they are happy. I will not achieve my own liberation until I have helped them achieve their liberation. So Bodhisattva takes that vow, right? Now, Buddha had taken that vow, of course. Now, to come back to my thread of my story, which I barely remembered. That Buddha had taken that vow. And yet, under the Bodhi tree 2,500 years ago, he sits down, at least on the exoteric level, in the mandala of the Kalachakra in the Akanishta heaven, sort of off-world, he, realized himself in union with all of the beings in the universe from the Kalachakra space. But how could he achieve great bliss, what they call bliss void indivisible, the sort of highest realization, the great bliss intuition of voidness, of selflessness, which is the diamond, that underlying the diamond cast. How could he do that? Well, if he says, I'm not going to attain enlightenment, I'm not going to attain freedom, I'm not going to attain happiness till all beings are happy. I don't feel that happy. I don't know how happy you are, but you're probably more happy, but probably you have your down times too. So how could he abandon us like this, you see? Since then, we had a few holocausts, Genghis Khan, we had a few problems on the planet, a few starvations, famines. So how could Buddha do that, you see, without abandoning beings? So this is what the Kalachakra form is, a sort of symbolic solution to this problem, which is an insoluble problem in some way. Because on the other hand, of course, while the Bodhisattva vow sounds good, I'm not going to attain liberation or freedom or full realization until all other beings are free of suffering. But on the other hand, since I have to help them become free of suffering, if I don't have the understanding with which I'm capable of helping them, then they'll never get free. So there's, in other words, you have to precede them in a way into liberation from suffering in order to be able to help them be free. At the same time, you can't be doing it in a way where you abandon them. You see. So then the only solution to this problem, after 33 years I finally realized, the only solution to this problem is the recognition that time is not that real. I don't say it's utterly unreal, but it's not that real. Time also only has a relative reality. So the only way you could really do it, you see, is if you... Okay, here you are. I vowed you're going to be happy before I'm going to be happy. But then I attain an understanding where I can see your future very clearly. And I can see that actually you could really achieve final happiness, that is to say nirvana, which most beings don't even think is possible, so they don't try to achieve it, right? Because we're taught that, no one can be that happy, Oh, that guy's happy, must be on drugs, or must be crazy, or he's going to have a horrible time later, That's how we're taught in Protestant world. And there's not that much happiness to go around, So the point is, there you are, and so the only way that I could really find happiness would be to also, in the moment of attaining an understanding, would be to attain an insight into your time of happiness at some time which will seem to you to be in the future. But to me, since I have immediately seen it, it becomes the present. So they say that Buddha, and in general, they say that one of the synonyms of Buddha is Triyadvajna in Sanskrit, which means knower of three times, past, present, and future, completely. In other words, a Buddha moment is also infinite in the sense that Buddha knows all the future moments of all sorts of things. But now, it's not a fatalistic, mechanistic thing, so, for example, the Bodhisattva vow carries over there because I see several possibilities for you. You could be happy in the 20th century, you could be happy in the 24th century, you could be happy 3 or 4 billion galaxies from now in another planet, otherwise, On the other hand, if I have an emanation, if I can reach out into those moments of your future, and I can be present with you, like as an emanation, or as an angel, or a dog, or a parakeet, or a person, or a teacher, or whatever, and accelerate your moving, that's what I would want to do. So that even within your sense of a subjective time span, it would be quicker for you to achieve final happiness, you see. So therefore, Buddha's realization of Buddhahood, in order not to abandon beings, must reach out into time, into what beings perceive as their futures, and be present with the beings through full compassion in all of those future moments. You follow me? And they should be immediate to the Buddha. In other words, those moments should immediately happen to the Buddha at the time so that they're not abandoned, those beings. So that they see the concreteness, in a way, of that future as concrete as the present, you see. You see what I'm saying? So now the greatest and most exquisite and elaborate symbol of this achievement, of being one with all beings in a way where you're there with them through their sense of time, through their span of time, which could mean many lives, many deaths and many rebirths in many forms. And you would be with them in those deaths and rebirths, and you would, because you have infinite capacity, you would die with them. You would be an angel on the path with them in the bardo. You would be in another life with them. You could do anything that's necessary with all of them simultaneously, you see. And that's the Kalachakra. Therefore, in the Kalachakra, you have 24 arms which reach into the 24 parts of the zodiac. You have, or the 27 lunar mansions, with your adding body, speech, and mind. And there's all kinds of complicated mathematics about the Kalachakra. Kalachakra connects to astrology, teaching of astrology and astronomy in Buddhism. It's the way of making the calendar in Tibet and in Mongolia. It was. So it had all kinds of other sciences in connection with it. So therefore, this is the Buddha time machine, okay? Is that clear? Did I explain the title? You understand it? Time itself, by your Bodhisattva vow of being there for all beings eternally until they achieve freedom, becomes a machine for their spiritual evolution. And you are become that time because you become one with this, because you become infinite as a Buddha, you see. But the key there is it's a very divine type of thing. As a Kalachakra Buddha, it's like a divinity, but there's this weird thing where that stops short of that since you didn't create them. It stops short of like theism, monotheism, creator theism, like that you had in India or that you have in the West, that because you didn't make the being's situation, you haven't made their suffering. You see. You're just doing your utmost to help them become free of that suffering. So therefore, and the weird thing is you just can't make them free of suffering. You can't like drop a blitz bomb on them or something like that and just blow them all out of suffering. You can't do that. Because the person would experience that as an attack, you see. Because they like their suffering sometimes. They want to keep it, So you have to educate them. It's the only way. So Buddha is an educator, unfortunately. Even as a god, he's an educator. Because people can only become free of suffering through their own understanding, and no one else can understand your understanding for you, Right? So that's the Buddha time machine, okay? Now, well, that's the Buddha time machine. What the hell? What? Yeah, any questions? I have on this computer some sadhana, some prayers about the Kalachakra and some traditional writings from the 15th century about it, which sort of talks about what we did, but we may not have time to even look at that. So better to actually engage with some of your questions. Yes, ma'am.
You stated that different parts of the body correspond to the different ways that time flows. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I could, but it would be elaborate. It's just that the Kalachakra has 24 hands, right? And then each hand has 5 fingernails, and so there's 120 of those. And then there are 3 levels. I mean, it just gets really, really complicated. But and then the joints. There's so many deities in each joint. There's 12 joints, major joints, 3 in the legs, 3 in the arms. Then there's the 5 chakras. I mean, there's so many. There's the sort of subtle yogic neurology of the Kalachakra. There's 3 Kalachakras, it is said: the outer Kalachakra, the inner Kalachakra, and what's called the alternative Kalachakra. And the outer one is the cosmos and the planets and the 9 planets, actually 10 planets from the Buddhist perspective. And the inner one is the body and all the chakras and the wind energies that go around in the chakras. And the Kalachakra has its own unique special system of chakras. And it's a little more complicated than some of the other ones. And then the other Kalachakra is the mandala, and where you create an alternative universe, which is the universe of the Kalachakra mandala. And you create that universe in order to be able to transform this universe most rapidly. Kalachakra is the only Tantra, Buddhist Tantra, that connects with a sort of planetary evolutionary teaching, sort of like a omega point kind of idea, like a Teilhard de Chardin point. Most Buddhist Tantras or teachings don't do that because they concern mainly the individual's transformation, because every individual that dies and is reborn doesn't necessarily return to the same planet. So therefore, the planet is not that important. In other words, you can die on this planet and be reborn in a completely different planet in a split second. And it's your evolution and your spiritual gene, as they call it, that you take with you into your other life that is the concern for Buddhism, for the Buddhist evolutionary teachings. But the Kalachakra deals with this planet, sort of as it is. That's the outer Kalachakra that relates to this planet. The inner one relates to the body of a human being in this planet that has a certain type of body, and then the other one is the divine Kalachakra mandala. And all of these things link up, like to the number of planets, the number of lunar mansions, and all of this connecting to the number of chakras here and there, the syllables in the alphabet. It's very, very elaborate and quite marvelous. Then the mandala also can be embodied in the body, like the skeleton forms the pillars of the buildings, the teeth form certain things. I mean, everything in the body forms some part of the mandala. The central channel is the main dais of the central deity, the central channel in the nervous system, because it's mainly a yoga thing. Any other question? Yes?
Is then time really existing, or is time something that we have for a facility?
From the Buddhist point of view, time is something that, I like your expression, it's like a facility. Because, you see, when we think of enlightenment, normally, we think of something mental. Because the Western word enlightenment has only a mental kind of meaning, like eureka, enlightenment. But Buddhist notion of Buddhahood is a physical evolutionary achievement as well as a mental one. The body and form takes time. The cells have to form. It also enjoys time. It needs time to evolve. Mind can change very quickly. Mind is incredibly swift. You can have a sudden insight or a satori experience or something, or an enlightenment experience of different depths and levels, different enlightenment experiences. But body takes its time to transform, you see. So, time, now as far as the reality of time, of course, Buddhist teaching about all elements of the universe, self, world, space, time, whatever it is that none of them are ultimately real. Nothing in the universe is ultimately real except that, meaning ultimate reality itself being the lack of the ultimate reality of all relative things. Which is, I'm not really trying to launch into this. This is a simple thing, Voidness is ultimate reality, or the Dharma body, all this kind of thing. And that is freedom and openness of all single things from being fixed as they are in any ultimate way, right? But that doesn't mean, Buddhism never says that time is absolutely unreal, or that the space is unreal, or the wall is unreal. It says it's only relatively real. So it has a very flexible, fluid reality. And time also has this kind of flexible, fluid reality. It's different to different people, therefore it's only relatively real. It's never fixed as a thing in itself, you could say, something like that. Therefore, when you become a Buddha, time is not so real to you as it is when you're a suffering being who's like waiting to get out of this situation. And you think it's very, very solid and real, just as the wall and the floor is solid and real, and it's inescapable and this sort of thing. But time is not real. One of our teachers used to say time is real, or the world is real, but it's not really real. He used to say. So that I don't. That may. But therefore, time, while real, you see, Buddha would be dualistic if attaining enlightenment was like made you remove yourself into another state where you no longer saw any beings as existing, or any time, or any space, or anything, and you were just sort of in a big, giant, vastness. If that was the final goal, that would be highly dualistic. You see, then it would be somehow achieved like exploding, atomizing all of this reality. You see? Whereas the nirvana of the Buddha, enlightenment of a Buddha, is seeing this here itself as vast, open freedom, you see, but yet still able to completely be aware of all of these details, you see. But yet once you're aware of these details in that way, then they are more, you're more capable of dealing with them. They're less overwhelming to you see. For example, particularly in Kalachakra, another unique thing about the Kalachakra Tantra, now referring to it as a yoga, is that Kalachakra Tantra talks about, like it connects to the history of this planet with a specific prophecy. It has a transformation process of body and mind that's sort of where everything is transmuted in place. Some other tantras, you sort of go out of body. You have like astral body practice and yogas and experience, and you have mandalas in different realms that you visit and so forth, and then you come back to this realm and then slowly bring this realm up to that level, this sort of thing. Whereas the alternative Kalachakra is you instantaneously, in a way, transform this realm into another realm in a visionary way, sort of. I mean, it's a procedure like that. They don't sort of use the bardo in the Kalachakra Tantra the way that they do in other unexcelled yoga tantras. In other words, all tantra, of course, uses death as a major vehicle of development, because death is freedom in a way, If talking about form and the evolution of form and time, death is the timeless thing. You lose the flow of time in the moment of death. And death, you lose concretization in a body in death, and you become a subtle body, mind. A subtle mind in a sort of virtual body, like an electronic body or something. And then that body can change like a dream body very rapidly, you see. So all tantric yogas use the death state and then transform in a sort of dreamlike level of relative reality where things are more plastic. And they can sort of rehearse evolution and accelerate evolution in that plastic way. For example, you could have a dream in which you could live 10 lives in one night. And each of those lives you could make some major gift. Like you could give away your kingdom, you could give away your body, you could give away your husband, that might be difficult. You could give away your child, you could give away your treasure, you could give anything away. And then that next morning you'd wake up like, whew, and you would have somehow accumulated the merit of making these great, fantastic gifts, what they call mahadanas, great gifts. 10 of them, like 10 lifetimes worth of great gifts in a night, in a dream. And of course, in a dream, maybe someone would say, well, it's not that hard to give away everything in a dream because it's a dream. But if you were having that dream so vividly that it was still real to you, you would go through the whole inner struggle of opening your heart to make the gift, you see, of detaching yourself. You follow me? So all Tantra, that's how Tantra works to help someone change from an ordinary being to a Buddha in a single life. What normally takes thousands of lives is they compress. That's what Milarepa was doing in the cave. He wasn't just sitting there huffing and puffing or trying to light a Bunsen burner under his butt, in the freezing Himalayas. He wasn't just sitting around doing some gimmick. He was dying 1,000,000 times a day, and having millions of lives and compressing those lives into a few years of yoga, of this kind of subtle body yoga, so that, from using especially He Vajra Tantra, Guhya Samaja Tantra, and Chakrasambhara Tantra, those three main tantras. And he was therefore evolving, sort of accelerating himself, spiritually, genetically engineering himself into a Buddha. Do you see what I mean? So all tantras do that. But in some weird way, which I do not fully understand, so I couldn't possibly explain, Kalachakra doesn't use the between state. It sort of transforms this here in a certain way, without departing from it withdrawing to a subtle realm where you can collapse a whole bunch of things into this. It uses this very realm in some way. This is very hard to work, and it more connects to the community also. The Kalachakra is the only unexcelled yoga tantra in which anyone can see the mandala without it being a transgression for the teacher to show it to them if they're not initiated. That's why they do these vast Kalachakra initiations where thousands of people go. Even non-Buddhists can go. And in Shambhala, they had many people who weren't Buddhists who would go to the Kalachakra mandala. And it's unique in that way. Because it has something to do with that the Kalachakra is the Buddha's most totally non-dualistic way of reaching into the evolution of us on this planet. And so somehow something's happening in our cells and atoms that have to do with the time machine. So somehow it can be openly available to us in a different way. I don't know why. And we think we're having a horrible time, and so died too early, and such a other thing went wrong, and there was a terrible war, and many thousands of people died. But nobody dies, you see, in the Kalachakra. I mean, they do, but the death is just a transformation. It's like, because they're immediately reborn, you see. But nobody's lost. This wailing in business about, oh, they're gone because they died, that materialist thing. Or beings who have ideology that people have only one life. And then they wait for a final something or other, That doesn't happen here because beings are constantly reborn. Life is a great sea of deaths and rebirths. And it's the direction of the flow of that sea rather than one particular death or rebirth that's crucial. I think that was more than just an answering one question. Any other question? Yes?
In the Kalachakra Tantra, what is the measurement of time? Is it seconds?
Oh, yeah, they have those.
What are the terms?
Well, Muhurta and Mahamahurta, they have all these different things that are based on, they're different kind of seconds and minutes and hours. They have, I think it's 36 hours in a day, so that means that the hour is shorter, whatever the mathematics of that is, and the second is, there's 100 seconds in a minute. I mean, it's like that.
Is there a measurement that's not based on the daily cycle?
No, it's based on the daily cycle, because Sun and Moon and Rahu and Kalagni, those 4 planets in particular, which are planets in that system, are most important. Sun connects with the right channel, Moon connects with the left channel, Sun is female, Moon is male. Rahu is the central channel, it's the darkness, it's the thing that eclipses the Moon. And then Kalagni is the tail of Rahu, which is like a supernova. It's like a super energy, like a white light explosive energy. And those 4 energies connect to elements in the body and moments of experience and all of that. So, in other words, from the Kalachakra perspective, the whole solar system itself is a theater within which we are unfolding spiritually. The fact that we have a sun and a moon and this and that connects to sort of cycles within our own biology in a very specific way. So it's not that we're accidentally conforming to some materialistically, just some rocks that happen to be cooking up there. The whole thing is structured that way, you see. Because the Kalachakra vision of the Buddha is very, very divine in regard to shaping the universe, not creating it out of nothing. We all are co-creating it all together. All beings create the universe together, including the gods, including the Buddhas, including the ordinary beings, including demons and hells and things. We're all together imagining and creating our universe all the time. But the Buddha beings are more powerful than ordinary beings, and therefore they can reshape it from the Kalachakra vision. They are reshaping it all the time to optimize the evolutionary opportunity of all of us and all other creatures and animals as well. Okay? Another question. Yes? Yeah.
At what point in the evolution of being does one gain access to this time machine that one can be with beings and one can experience their happiness? Does one have to be a Bodhisattva?
Yeah. But it comes through, it's very important to be a Bodhisattva. But it doesn't mean, don't think about being a Bodhisattva is like some big thing in the sense of, it makes you higher or better. Actually, Bodhisattva thinks of themselves as lower and at the service of all beings. The Bodhisattva is simply a change of orientation. I mean, basically, I should have said this before, but, basically you have to understand that the Buddha's whole insight had to do with understanding the nature of his self in a different way than he had previously understood it. That is to say, that when someone thinks that the most important and the realest thing in the world is themselves, their self, then everything about their experience of life is distorted. And they're put in a situation by that initial misperception that I'm it, I'm the one, I'm the great thing. Once I have that, not even as a theory, but as a sort of habitual sense, like I'm the solid thing in here, kind of, then I'm in this impossible situation where the whole world doesn't agree with me. And they're all after me, and I'm trying to get more from them than they're willing to give, and therefore I'm always frustrated, and I'm fighting with the world, you see. And all other beings think they're the real thing, you see. So, and I don't agree with them, you see. So the Buddha suddenly realized that that's the whole problem, is that the individual being has exaggerated the self-importance, the self-concern, and based on the initial self-misperception. And because of that, everything, that's why he said, when you're under that kind of deluded state, that you're it, and nobody else is agreeing, you're suffering no matter what. Because you're never satisfied, you see. And therefore, all the goal of Buddhism is that people come to the understanding that self that they think is the real solid thing is not a real solid thing. That doesn't mean there is no self. There's a relative changing, sort of transparent porous self, a relative self that's sort of interconnected with all other beings, you see, but is not any more important than them, you see, is also tuned into them so that its sense of happiness is connected to their happiness, you see. So see, what the Bodhisattva change is, at first, is simply a dawning on that connectedness, and then saying, well, since actually the way I feel is so connected with others, and there's so many more of them than me, if I put more of my focus on how they feel than on how I feel, and I work to make them feel better, then I'm naturally going to feel better, more easily. And sort of by forgetting about the self, then the self lightens up, you see, in a certain way. And the Bodhisattva is this sort of inversion thing of turning yourself inside out, where you find your connectedness to others and you emphasize that rather than your concern for yourself. You substitute what they call concern for others, you put that in place as your preoccupation in place of self-preoccupation, okay? Now, that's just a switch over. And at first it's sort of, and Christianity is right on the beam with that too. It's right in there, and most world religions are actually, almost all of them. But then it sort of begins to feel like maybe when others are going to hurt you, it's going to become, if you just focus on them, you're going to be abnegating yourself, martyring yourself, you're going to get in a big problem, But so you don't do it that way, you do it in a way where you don't fall for that trap, and you just do focus on your concern for others, and then actually you do find very quickly that you do, in spite of it, become more cheery. The less you're concerned about your state, the better your state is. It's sort of an aesthetic law almost in Buddhism. So now the highest goal of that, Buddhahood, is simply when you really uproot the original misperception, and you don't worry about yourself anymore, because you become like transparent. It's like you look at yourself, and instead of a solid thing there's just a pane of glass. You look out the other side, and there's a whole million other beings in your past, all the people you know, all the people you didn't used to know, and you become like a kind of connected and sort of released inside and loosened, and then you really become blissful. You release all of that inner tension, you become totally blissful, and that's Buddhahood. So that's actually all Buddhahood is. Because then you become so much connected to all other beings that you expand to meet the needs of all of those other beings, and you become sort of a great cloud around all beings or something like that. You become like a cloud being rather than a being that's tightly enfolded within a skin. And the outside the skin is not me, it is some alien thing, you see, which is the normal way we struggle. Okay? So the Bodhisattva turnabout is just a turnabout, a dawning of that, you see. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Do you have a sudden transformation?
Well, it can be. It can be sudden, or it can take time. But the suddener the better, they say. And actually the Tibetans have finally one takes a vow, that I'm going to do this for all beings. There's like a beautiful literature of Bodhisattva, especially the Shantideva's book, Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, is particularly beautiful. But then they also have a vow to take the vow if it seems difficult. The point is, if you see, you have to go back and step back, you see, and then first you have to question all of our ideology about reality. We are all brought up in a materialist society with a materialistic science that pretends to know a lot more than it really does. And it tells us that we're just a random epiphenomenon of matter, some molecules jumped up out of some sort of sea of methane, and that they hopped around these molecules, and then suddenly there was a brain and had an Apple computer or something. And it's just an accident, it doesn't mean anything, it all goes back, and that's the big brave thing, is to realize that it's all just meaningless, and that there's only live this one life, and all that. And we are a little bit ingrained in that, even if we have some spiritual ideals, we still have a kind of sense that we are this life, this body of this life. And our mind is just a product of the body of this life. So we then fight to hold our body, and we want to have like a plastic heart and plastic kidneys and invest in research. Finally we get the idea of Buddhahood. Finally we realize not only for ourselves but for others, you see. And then that's really fantastic. So the time machine, you can see the mandala anytime. They say that anyone who sees it, that powder sand mandala, the color particle mandala, goes into the unconscious, and it's such a beautiful thing. It's so exquisite that it puts an imprint in the gene, in the spiritual gene, so that when we encounter this mandala palace in some future state, we won't be scared of it. Like many people, if they walked into real divine glory, would be terrified. They'd think that they'd be burned to death, or it would be too bright, or too something. It was not my Zen aesthetic or something. All this color, I don't want it to heaven. People would think, you see, and so look for a little dark, quiet hole with one candle burning. Which might turn out to be, something else, a different life form, one that lives in the dark. So anyway, that's the thing. So anyone can see the Kalachakra, anyone can look at it, Anyone can begin to open the imagination. It is often said that Buddhism's main thing is to meditate, or Eastern things are mainly meditating, but that's partly true. But before meditating, it's very important to encounter the vision. This Western culture that we have is not that visionary a culture compared to the culture of India, particularly. And so we need help with our opening of our imagination, especially from India. I'm sorry, Iran doesn't cut it. Only India. Because, you know why? Like nowadays, we have plenty of imagination. We have like Lawnmower Man and Computer Man and Close Encounter and this zombie and I don't know what we have, good and bad. Incredible thing. Why? Because we are a culture that is we have a lot of leisure. We don't have, they're practically taking all the jobs away from us because they'd have to pay us too much and they're sending them off to all these slave cultures. I mean, it's like, we don't know, we are a culture that for the first time in our history, instead of trying to avoid a potato famine, or grubbing right away to survive the next week, which is what always Northern Europe was up to. In fact, they didn't even have potatoes until they discovered America and started robbing America. We have not had that leisure, you see, to open the imagination. Anybody who tried to imagine in the West was executed by the priest or the king as being, wasting their time having free libido, going around having fantasies. It must be Satan, Burn them at the stake. But India was rich as California in the ancient time, It was like Beverly Hills, the whole place. And people in India in ancient time, therefore, there was a need for people to learn to use that imagination and that free energy, of large numbers of people in India. It's hard to us now to imagine because we think of India as a desperately poor place because the British have been robbing it for 400 years. It got poor. But it was the richest place, really, originally. And so they had that freedom to think it through, you see, and to have these wonderful things. So when you read the literature of India, Hinduism, Buddhism, the great visionary things of this palace and that deity, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's so rich. It really is like chocolate mousse for the imagination. Okay, so I think we're not supposed to run on here forever, right? It's 9:15. I was going to do some... What? I invoke the glorious Guru Chakranatha, Supreme... What? I'm not. I don't listen to him, I wouldn't. I invoke the glorious Guru Chakranatha, Supreme in all... Just as a good omen, I'll read like the beginning of this thing written by Ketubje, the Panchen Lama's former life, just to close the thing, It's in a translation. I invoke the invocation thing, to talk about connecting to the Kalachakra. I invoke the glorious Guru Chakranatha. Chakranatha means the wheel savior or the machine savior. Chakranatha. Supreme in all respects, whose great seal body, now that's not the seal that balances a bowl on its nose. That's a seal that means a kind of pattern of embrace, of as if a body that is a great seal, meaning that it's connected to the universe in the mode of like total orgasmic union with the entire universe. That's what the great seal is. The great seal is like a permanent orgastic state that doesn't dissipate, of all senses and all flesh together in one vast permanent state. That's the great seal. It's not the one with a ball on its nose. Supreme in all respects, whose great seal body is naturally supreme, undissipated bliss. Please grant me mundane and transcendent powers. I invoke the prime Buddha, who taught all tantras at Sri Danyakataka. That was the South India stupa that I mentioned, the great southern monument. Having won supreme exaltation, unveiled 4 bodies, please grant us mundane and transcendent powers. I invoke the upholders of the esoteric, Suchandra, Devendra, Teji, Somadatta, and the Mohini emanation Sureshvara. Please grant us both the powers. And anyway, I'm not going to read all that. It's a long list of kings. Then this is a nice one. I invoke Vishvamurti and Sureshana, then Manjushri Yashas and Prince Pundarika, and the dark side Yama Terminator Bhadra. Please grant us mundane and transcendent powers. Those were, Pundarika was a form of Avalokiteshvara, the same lineage as the Dalai Lama, who was born as a king of Shambhala, and who wrote a famous book on the Kalachakra Tantra called The Clear Light, the Vimala Prabha, the Stainless Light. And it's a weird book to read because all the Western scholars have their theories about it, but the author of the book, every chapter and section he says, well, since I am Avalokiteshvara, I'm supposed to write this book, I better do a good job. And he starts to write. It's like saying, well, I'm God, so I should be writing this book well, so I'll do a good job. He's constantly referring to himself, actually, which is weird if it's a forger, So it's just the invocation. There are some better part. These are just names. There's no use. I'll read the end part. I invoke the glorious deity of the astral mandala, king of terrifics, Vajravega, the diamond force. You know, that's George Lucas's force, Vajravega, who tames the savage, the 60 protectors and the host of yoginis. Please grant us mundane and transcendent powers. May we use our body of leisure and opportunity, hard to find as a wish-fulfilling gem, for meaningful practice of the Dharma, and being developed by minor and the supreme initiations, please bless us to properly hold the vows. By the first stage yoga of the profound and the vivid, dawning as the completely pure mandala of the outer and inner Kalachakra, please bless us to cease ordinary perception and conception. Perfecting totally the changeless bliss by the power of the sixth branch Vajra Yoga, please bless us swiftly to achieve the void form. Okay, that's another Kalachakra specialty, that in Kalachakra there are no atoms. That there's a way of perceiving reality without atoms, just as sheer image. Sort of like a computer virtual reality thing. Perceiving all reality as virtual reality, and you need no atoms in that, just image. That's an interesting one. I don't understand it, but it's called the void form. Please bless us swiftly to achieve the void form whose mirror image nature has full details. Eradicating all obstacles to practice the good path, providing at will all inner and outer assistance. Please bless us to spread wide the teaching and practice of the Buddha Dharma in general, and especially the Kalachakra. Oh, this is very beautiful. Is this one too? One more thing. I know. I'm stopping right away. Just one more verse. Reverence to the Guru, indivisible from the holy Manjughosha and the primal Buddha Kalachakra. Please grant now all common and supreme powers. Reverence to the primal. Now listen to this. Reverence to the primal Buddha Kalachakra, whose body transcends the subatomic realm, shining translucent in every aspect, whose speech touches the hearts of all beings with inexpressible, indomitable, booming voice, whose mind is the vajra of the great bliss of the creativity of the undissipated drop, encompassing all facts while sporting with the aspectless voidness lover. May the 36 yoginis protect me and grant the fabulous, superb, pure perception, destroying the machinery of organic, inorganic ordinariness by means of the changeless 21,600 blisses. May Losam Dakpa settle in the center of our heart, who clearly became our very eye, illuminating the world as the bright sun of the speech of truth, at zenith in the sky of the victor's superb mysteries. In this evil place, the impure triple world, the art to loosen binding chains of birth and death is the supreme first stage with its mystic keys, according to the outer, inner, and other Kalachakra. Herein is clearly taught the art of evocation, following the intent of Pundarika Bodhisattva. This one I like. The artistry of finely painting with Samadhi's brush on the surface of the jewel wall of unruffled mind, the 100-colored masterpiece of the complete habitat and inhabitant mandala. Isn't that nice? On the jewel wall of the unruffled mind. That's really beautiful. Okay. Thank you.